This is a presentation suitable for level 1 and level 2 learners for English writing, creating documents. We're going to look at how to create instructional and descriptive documents. You can watch this in combination with the creation of formal and informal documents as well. So the aims of this session, we'll have a look at the features of instructional and descriptive documents, and also the language and how to construct such documents. And then there will be a task at the end for you to work on outside of this session, in which you'll create one instructional and one descriptive document, which you'll then email to davidp@provista.co.uk. So instructional texts can include such things as instructions and directions, so things like assembly instructions, if you're putting together a piece of furniture, for example. Recipes, each stage of the recipe is described as part of an instructional text, and fitness guides. We also have guides which would come under instructional text, such as software guides and processes which are used in the medical and care professions. The tone of instructional texts, they tend to be organized. They're set out in stages or steps. They're focused so that the reader can take in what they're being instructed, and they're very specific to the tasks that they're being used for. The language of them, they're formal in work-related instructions, but they can be informal in what's known as leisure-related instructions. So if you're reading or setting out computer game cheats or a fitness guide, you may use more informal language because you're trying to encourage people or share frustration with them, particularly if it's for things like those computer game cheats. Instructional language, instructional texts will use linking phrases such as start by and begin with, next, then, and then when it comes to the last stages of whatever they're setting out for you, they'll use phrases like finally, to finish with, or conclude by. They'll always be telling you what you need to do. So you can see an example here. This is one actually in a letter, I think. Which says the quickest way to fill your tax return is online, and you need to send us your online tax return by the 31st of January 2021. And instructional texts may also use images to show how a process should take place. So we have an example here of how to jumpstart a car, and it uses imagery so that anyone reading it can look and follow the stages, so that when they're reading instruction of what they need to do, they have a visual guide so they know where to attach the jump leads and the layout of their engine. In this example, the writers have also numbered each image, so it's easy to follow, and you know to read them from left to right rather than up, down, up, down. Descriptive texts, examples of these can include adverts, articles, especially travel guides and long read pieces of writing, and things like witness statements for insurance documents or police notes. The tone of descriptive texts, for adverts and articles, they usually be quite evocative and poetic. They're trying to create a sense of mood and take the reader somewhere that may encourage them either to buy a product or continue reading. For the things like the witness statements, though, accuracy is going to be very, very important, so that the information can be got across correctly and can be acted upon by the appropriate authorities. So a few examples of descriptive language. It will set the scene, usually in its opening phrases. So we have a few examples here. Through the miracle of printing, let me whisk you to a gentle fold in the Cotswolds. So just using that phrasing, you know, whisk you to a gentle fold in the Cotswolds creates a kind of rural, bucolic image before we even start reading the piece. The house is large, too large to be a family home, but not enough to be a country hotel. So just in the description, rather than just saying the house is large, the writer's gone a bit further here and set it out so that we can picture the actual dimensions of the building. When I was an art student in the 1970s, I used to doss in a squat in Victoria. Now here, the writers use descriptive language to evoke the time. you know, talking about himself as an art student back in the 1970s. I used to DOS in a squat in Victoria. So straight away we can picture, rightly or wrongly, a kind of cramped, untidy, dingy environment in the centre of London through the use of those words DOS, squat. You can almost sense the sleeping bag on the floor. But descriptive language can also be quite basic. And again, if we were talking about for police statements, something like this one down here, the suspect is a white male, 5'9" tall with blonde hair and wears metal framed spectacles. He was seen driving a green Nissan Almera. So that's full of descriptive detail, which is just what would be needed for that particular type of document. There's no frills to it at all. It just tells us the information that we need to know. But if you want an example of evocative descriptive language, we have the example here. Was it supposed to be this hot in August? The air was like chicken broth. Now, how often have we wandered around on hot, humid days and felt like the air was being very, very oppressive? Now, we could say the air was being very oppressive, but by using a descriptive, evocative phrase like the air was like chicken broth, we can almost imagine walking through and a kind of soup attacking us as we walk. In terms of constructing these texts, if you're writing an instructional text, which is a possibility in an exam, you might be asked to write something which shows somebody how to do something. It's essential that the document is easy for people to read. People cannot follow instructions which are difficult to read or laid out poorly. There are a few options in terms of how you could do this layout. The best suggested way with an instructional text is to set out the stages in numbered or bullet points. And we have three numbers here, 1 to 3. This is the method for preparing a particular type of salad. The process for making this dish has been split into 3 sections. Each stage within the sections is separated by full stops. You could also split each stage into numbered stages for a longer stage-by-stage appearance. I'll show you that in a minute, but if we read through it, we can see that within the first section it gives us the instructions of what we need to heat the oven to, and what we need to do with tomatoes, and that we then leave them to sit for 15 minutes. So it's gathered together 2 stages here, separated out by the full stops. And because we need to leave something just to sit and marinate for 15 minutes, that seems a logical point to then finish that first section and go on to the second section. And again, another 2 stages are described here. Spread the chunks of bread out on a baking tray and toss with 1 tablespoon of the oil. Bake for 10 to 15 minutes or until lightly toasted. So again, we put the chunks of bread into the oven, and while they're baking, that seems to be a logical point to stop that point and then go on to the third point, which gathers together 4 stages here. In a bowl, whisk together the remaining oil, the vinegar and shallot, season to taste, toss the anchovies with the tomatoes, croutons, olive oil dressing, the olives and half the basil in a large bowl, and spoon the panzanella onto a serving plate and top with the remaining basil. So what it's done is it's tried, I think, to put that into 3 sections, and what it's put within the sections is the relevant stage relating to that. So the first one, what you have to do with the oven and the pre-preparation. The second phase being what you do to the bread and how long you bake it for. And the third stage being all the things you need to do in order to set up your salad dressing. Because it's been numbered grouped together in those 3 ways, it's easy for us to read them and concentrate on them in sections. But we can, and there's nothing to say you cannot do this. You could also split each of those individual stages into a numbered list, like we have here, which takes all of those things from that previous page and puts them into 7 stages. Which, if you have to create an instructional text, I would just say, use whichever method suits you best. The writing and language in instructional text is often focused on the task at hand and very specific. So when you're setting out those stages, You don't want to get too bogged down in extra detail, and certainly don't include anything which is unnecessary. So stay on the point when setting out your instructions. If you want to reference things which shouldn't be done, or you do want to reference additional information that's maybe not strictly relevant to the actual instructions you're giving, then insert that information into brackets or put asterisks around it. So here's an example. Somebody trying to wire a plug, for example. Step number 3, cross over the blue and red fuses, and then in brackets, do not disturb the brown fuse or you will break the circuit. By putting it in brackets, it isolates it from the main instruction, but it means that we can read it so that and it's relevant at least to the instructions, because it's talking about the coloured fuses and giving information about why we wouldn't disturb the brown fuse. But because it has the brackets around it, it means that we can read the first part and take in the instruction, and then read the second part, which just gives us the hint about what we should not do whilst carrying this stage out. Okay, I'm going to ask you to take a moment to read this piece of text. We'll read it together. I didn't go into acting to win awards, but nights like this made all those hours spent rehearsing in drafty church halls or crammed into the cobweb dressing rooms of small theatres seem more worthwhile. There's very little that's actually glamorous about the process of acting or putting a show together, except for those moments where you realise that the play is working. That moment when it moves from a group of people pretending to be somebody else in a fantasy and becomes, even if only for a few hours of performance, an actual, genuine experience. So that piece of text demonstrates that descriptive text can be based on a number of different things. It can be based on your own experiences, the things that you've done. It could be based on emotions, how you felt while you were doing it, or how you feel about the topic at hand. And it can also be based on the place and environment. And it uses those phrases, about cold church halls and cobwebbed dressing rooms, evoking the environment where these productions are put together. In terms of a descriptive text, I mean, there's no hard and fast rules about this. Ultimately, you're still looking to make sure that your text relates to the subject that you're writing about, but you can illustrate that topic with reference to experience, emotion, or the environment. In terms of the layout of a descriptive text, you're just looking to write conventionally. Short paragraphs are ideal with extra information added in each paragraph so as to create an overall narrative. The piece just now about the actor, that was one whole paragraph taking in a number of different things. What we're going to read here are short paragraphs used in an insurance claim. And how the information builds. So we've done it in short paragraphs all the way through, just single sentences, apart from in the last paragraph where there's 2 sentences in the paragraph. I was driving towards the junction of Oxtal Road and Lambert Street when the cyclist drove off the pavement in front of me. The cyclist had come out between 2 parked cars and was moving across the road in order to head back down Oxtal Road. I hadn't been able to see the cyclist as one of the cars that it came between was a high-backed Range Rover. I caught the front wheel of the bike and this caused the cyclist to fall into my car. I hit the brakes but was unable to avoid the cyclist injuring their cheek on my passenger wing mirror. So we can see how they're short paragraphs, but each one just builds the story up. Start off by talking about where I was driving to and how I came across the cyclist. Then the next paragraph explains, where the cyclist had come up between and where they were headed. Then a paragraph about why we hadn't seen them. And then a final paragraph just taking in the actual accident and its consequences. So you may like to use the notes in this presentation to help you. I would like you please to write 1 instructional and 1 descriptive text. Your instructional text can be of your choice, and it can be as long or as short as required. Topics you could use could include recipes, how to make something, computer game cheats, advice on how to handle situations, just choose something that you'd feel comfortable advising readers about. Your descriptive text should be the biggest challenge you have overcome, and this can be either professional or personal. Give background on what the challenge was and the difficulties you had to solve, as well as how you overcame the challenge. So that's given you the construction there in terms of what you'll write about in terms of approaching that descriptive text. When you've completed them, please send your text through to davidp@provista.co.uk. I look forward to reading them, and good luck.